The stars had never looked so dark. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of the orbital station and watched the alien fleet emerge from hyperspace. One ship appeared first, then 10, then 100. Within minutes, the space around Earth's moon filled with vessels so large they blocked out entire constellations. The Valori hegemony had arrived. Across Earth, billions of people looked up at their screens and saw the same terrible sight. News anchors struggled to find words. Children asked their parents what was happening. Governments held emergency meetings that lasted through the night. The aliens sent their first message 12 hours after arriving. It was simple and direct. They called themselves the Valori, and they had conquered over 1,000 star systems. They offered humanity a choice: surrender everything or be destroyed. High Arbiter Kethvon sat in his command chamber aboard the flagship and waited for the humans to respond. He had done this many times before. He knew how it would go. First came the fear. Then came the desperate attempts to fight. Then came the surrender. It was always the same. His species had perfected conquest over 10,000 years. The Valori were tall creatures, nearly 3 meters high, with hard shells covering their bodies and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. They had evolved as predators on a harsh world, and they had carried that predator nature to the stars. Kethvon reviewed the information his scouts had gathered about humanity. A young species, barely a few centuries into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to the hegemony. Their military forces were laughable. They had no chance of resistance. And yet, something about his reports troubled him. The humans had been at war with each other for most of their history. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet. They had used those weapons on each other. Any sensible species would have destroyed itself long ago. But humans had not destroyed themselves. Instead, they had somehow learned to live together. They had built a united world government. They had reached out to the stars not with weapons, but with messages of greeting. Kethvon dismissed his concerns. It did not matter. The humans would fall like all the others. 3 days passed. The humans did not attack. They did not surrender. They did not run. Instead, they sent a single small shuttle toward the Valori fleet. The shuttle carried no weapons. It broadcast no threats. It simply requested permission to dock with the flagship. Kethvon's advisors urged him to destroy it. It could be a bomb. It could be a trick. The humans were clearly insane. But Kethvon was curious. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever responded this way. He granted the shuttle permission to dock. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped onto the Valori flagship wearing a simple gray suit. She was a small woman, barely reaching the chest of the smallest Valori guard. She had dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She walked through corridors decorated with the bones of conquered species. She passed displays of weapons taken from defeated enemies. She saw everything, and she showed no fear. The Valori guards did not know what to make of her. Prisoners usually trembled. Diplomats usually begged. This woman simply walked, looking around with what seemed like genuine interest. She was brought before High Arbiter Kethvon in the Great Council Chamber. 12 senior Valori officials sat in a semicircle, their shells gleaming under harsh lights. Behind them hung the banners of worlds they had conquered. Kethvon studied the human ambassador. She was so small, so fragile. He could kill her with a single blow from any of his 4 arms. "You know why we are here," he said through the translator device. "You know what we want. Your planet, your resources, your people. Everything you have belongs to the hegemony now." Elena Vasquez nodded slowly. "I understand your terms. Then you surrender?" "No," she smiled. "I have a different offer." The council chamber went silent. No conquered species had ever made a counteroffer. The very idea was absurd. Kethvon leaned forward. You are in no position to negotiate. We have 40,000 warships. You have nothing. You are right, Elena said. We cannot defeat your fleet. We cannot stop you from taking our planet. If you want Earth, you can have it. Then what is your offer? Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. Every Valori weapon in the room aimed at her instantly. It is just a data tablet, she said calmly. I want to show you something. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed images of Earth, cities filled with life, forests and oceans and mountains, people working, playing, creating. This is our world, Elena said. This is what you want to conquer. But I am here to tell you that you cannot conquer Earth. Not really. Kethvon made a sound that his species used for laughter. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Your planet is nothing special. You have conquered planets, Elena agreed. You have taken resources and enslaved populations. But you have never actually conquered a people. You have only ever broken them. She changed the image. Now it showed human history. Wars and suffering. Slavery and genocide. The worst things humans had ever done to each other. We know about breaking, Elena said. We did it to ourselves for thousands of years. We became very good at it. The Valori watched with growing confusion. Why was this human showing them weakness? Elena changed the image again. Now it showed something different. People rebuilding after wars. Former enemies shaking hands. Walls coming down. Nations uniting. But we also learned something else, she said. We learned how to heal. How to change. How to take enemies and turn them into friends. She turned off the display and looked directly at Kethvon. You can destroy our cities. You can kill our people. You can burn everything we have built. But you will never conquer us. Because the thing that makes us human is not in our buildings or our technology. It is in here. She touched her chest. It is in every single one of us. And you cannot take it away. Kethvon felt something strange. An unfamiliar sensation crawling through his body. He had no word for it in his language. What do you want? He asked. Elena smiled again. It was not a smile of fear or submission. It was the smile of someone who knew something he did not. I want you to come to Earth, she said. Not as conquerors, as guests. Bring your officials. Bring your admirals. Bring anyone you want. Come and see who we really are. Why would we do that? Because you are curious. Elena met his eyes without flinching. You have conquered 1,000 worlds, and none of them have ever invited you home for dinner. Admit it, High Arbiter. You want to know what makes us different. Kethvon sat in silence for a long moment. His advisors whispered warnings. This was clearly a trap. The humans were planning something. But the human ambassador just stood there, small and fragile and completely unafraid. We accept, Kethvon heard himself say. He did not understand why he said it. He did not understand what he was agreeing to. He only knew that something had changed in that council chamber. Something had shifted. For the first time in his long career of conquest, High Arbiter Kethvon felt uncertain about what would happen next. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he did not know existed, he felt the first small seed of something the humans called hope. The Valori shuttles descended through Earth's atmosphere on a bright morning in September. 300 of the hegemony's most powerful figures sat inside, watching the blue planet grow larger in their viewports. Admiral Sirith pressed her face close to the window. She had destroyed worlds before. She had watched planets burn from orbit. But she had never actually visited one of her conquests. Admirals did not walk on the ground. They stayed in space, where they belonged. Yet here she was, descending toward a world she should have been bombing. High Arbiter Kethvon had chosen his delegation carefully. He brought military leaders and government officials. He brought scientists and scholars. He brought the heirs of the great Valori houses, young nobles who had never known anything but victory. He expected trouble. He prepared for betrayal. He assumed the humans were planning some kind of trap. The shuttles landed at a facility near a human city called Geneva. Through the windows, the Valori could see crowds of humans gathered behind barriers. Security forces stood ready. Weapons, Kethvon ordered. Everyone armed. But when the shuttle doors opened, the Valori found something unexpected. The humans were smiling, not the smiles of defeated people trying to please their conquerors, not the smiles of those hiding weapons behind their backs. These were genuine smiles of welcome. Some humans waved. Others held up signs with words the translators rendered as "Welcome to Earth." A human child broke free from her mother and ran toward the nearest Valori soldier. The soldier raised his weapon, ready to fire. The child stopped in front of him, looked up at his towering form, and said, "You are so tall. Can I see your claws?" The soldier did not know what to do. In his entire career, no one had ever asked to see his claws. He looked at his commander. His commander looked at Kethvon. Kethvon had no idea what to say. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped forward and gently guided the child back to her mother. "Perhaps later," she said. "Our guests have had a long journey." The Valori delegation was taken to a large building that humans called a hotel. Each member received a private room with windows overlooking the city. The rooms contained soft beds, entertainment screens, and small refrigerators filled with food. Kethvon examined his room carefully, searching for hidden weapons or surveillance devices. He found nothing. The room was simply a room. A knock came at his door. He opened it to find a young human male standing outside. "Hello," the human said. "My name is David. I have been assigned as your personal liaison during your stay. If you need anything at all, please ask me." Kethvon stared at him. "You are my guard?" "No, sir. I am your helper. My job is to make sure you are comfortable and to answer any questions you might have about Earth. Why would you help me?" "I am your enemy." David smiled. "You are our guest. Guests are not enemies." Over the following days, the Valori delegation experienced things they had never imagined. Admiral Sirith was taken to a school, not a military academy, but a regular school where human children learned reading and mathematics and art. She watched young humans paint pictures and sing songs and play games. A teacher invited her to speak to the class. The children asked her questions about space travel and alien planets. They were not afraid of her. They were curious. One child asked, "Do you have children?" Sirith did not understand the question at first. Valori did not raise children. Young Valori were taken from their parents at hatching and raised in training facilities. She had never known her parents. She had never wanted to. "No," she said finally. "I do not have children." "That is sad," the child said. "Children are the best part." Sirith thought about those words for a long time afterward. Kethvon was taken to something called a museum. Inside, humans have preserved the history of their species. He saw paintings and sculptures and ancient weapons. He saw photographs of wars and disasters and suffering. He also saw photographs of recovery. Cities rebuilt. Peace treaties signed. Former enemies working together. "Why do you keep these memories?" he asked his guide. "Why remember the bad things?" "So we do not repeat them," the guide answered. "We were not always good, High Arbiter. We did terrible things to each other. But we learned. We changed. We keep these memories to remind ourselves what we must never become again." Kethvon had no response. The hegemony did not keep such records. The hegemony celebrated conquest. Weakness was forgotten. Failure was erased. Other members of the delegation had their own experiences. Valora scientist was taken to a human laboratory where researchers were working on cures for diseases. She watched humans dedicate their lives to saving others, including people they would never meet. Why? She asked. These sick people are strangers. They cannot pay you. They cannot help you. Why do you care if they live or die? The human researcher looked confused by the question. Because they are people, he said, as if the answer was obvious. All people deserve to live. A young Valori noble was taken to something called a concert. Inside a great hall, humans sat together and listened as other humans played instruments and sang. The music was unlike anything in the hegemony. Valora music was structured and rigid, designed to inspire obedience and loyalty. Human music was wild and unpredictable. It made him feel things he could not name. When the concert ended, he found water leaking from his eyes. He did not understand why. His liaison told him he was crying. Is that bad? The noble asked. No, the liaison said. It means the music touched your heart. The noble had not known his heart could be touched throughout the delegation. Similar changes were happening. Valori, who had spent their entire lives in service to the hegemony, were discovering something new. They were discovering that other ways of living. EXISTEDA weapons master learned about human cooking and found he enjoyed creating things instead of destroying them. A strategic planner was taken to a human park and watched children play games with no winners or losers. Games played simply for joy. A political officer attended a human debate and saw people disagree with each other without anyone being executed. Kethvan watched his delegation changing. He saw hard warriors softening. He saw cold officials asking questions. He saw young nobles laughing at human jokes. He should have been alarmed. He should have gathered his people and returned to the fleet immediately. Instead, he found himself walking through the human city at night, looking at the lights, listening to the sounds, watching the people. A human woman stopped beside him. She was old, with white hair and wrinkled skin. You look lost, she said. I am not lost. I know exactly where I am. That is not what I meant. She smiled kindly. You look like someone who is seeing the world for the first time. Kethvan considered her words. She was right. He had visited hundreds of conquered worlds. He had seen countless alien species, but he had never actually looked at any of them. He had only ever seen resources to be taken, enemies to be defeated, populations to be controlled. He had never seen people. Thank you, he said to the old woman. For what? He did not know how to answer. He only knew that something inside him was changing. Something he had thought was dead was slowly coming back to life. And for the first time in many years, High Arbiter Kethvan was afraid. Not of humans. Not of traps or weapons or tricks. He was afraid of himself. He was afraid of who he might become. 6 months passed on Earth. The Valori fleet remained in orbit, waiting for orders that never came. Every week, High Arbiter Kethvan sent reports to the hegemony home world. Every week, he promised that the delegation would return soon. Every week, he lied. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. Kethvan did not want to leave. None of them did. Admiral Sirith had returned to the school many times. She had learned the names of the children. She brought them gifts from the Valori shuttle, small things that sparkled and glowed. The children called her Aunt Sirith now. One day, the teacher asked if she would like to join the class for their weekly activity. The activity was called storytelling. Each child would tell a story from their imagination. Sirith did not understand. You want them to speak things that are not true? We want them to be creative, the teacher explained. To imagine worlds that do not exist. To dream, Sirith had never dreamed. Valori did not dream. They trained and fought and obeyed. Dreams were a waste of time, but she sat and listened as the children spoke. One told a story about a brave knight who rescued a dragon instead of killing it. Another told a story about a spaceship that traveled to the end of the universe and found a giant cookie. The stories were silly and impossible and wonderful. When it was her turn, Sirith found words coming out of her mouth that she had never planned to speak. She told a story about a warrior who grew tired of war. A warrior who put down her weapons and learned to grow flowers instead. The children loved it. They clapped and cheered. One little girl hugged her leg. That night, alone in her room, Sirith cried for the second time in her life. Across the planet, similar transformations were happening. The Valori scientist had joined the human research team. She worked alongside them now, searching for cures to diseases that affected species she had never met. She had discovered something humans called purpose. "Why do you work so hard?" she asked her human colleague one night. "You could earn more money doing other things. You could live easier lives." Her colleague shrugged. "Some things are more important than money. Some things are more important than easy lives. I want to help people. I want to make the universe a little bit better than I found it." The scientist thought about these words. In the hegemony, value was measured in conquest and power. The idea of measuring value in kindness was completely new to her. She liked it. The young noble had discovered human literature. He read books constantly now, hundreds of them. Stories about love and loss and hope and fear. He read about heroes who sacrificed themselves for strangers. He read about ordinary people who did extraordinary things, simply because they believed it was right. One book changed him more than any other. It was a simple story about a man who chose to forgive the person who had hurt him most. Instead of seeking revenge, the man offered mercy. The noble put down the book and stared at the wall for a long time. In the hegemony, forgiveness did not exist. Enemies were destroyed. Wrongs were punished. The concept of choosing mercy over revenge was not just unusual. It was revolutionary. Kethvon had his own discoveries. He had found human music, specifically a type called blues. The songs were sad and beautiful, and they spoke of pain and loss and the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. He listened to the same songs again and again, feeling emotions he had spent his entire life suppressing. He felt grief for the worlds he had destroyed. He felt shame for the people he had killed. He felt something that might have been regret, but the most dangerous discovery came from a human philosopher. Kethvon attended a lecture at a human university. The philosopher spoke about something called free will, the idea that every person had the ability to choose their own path, that no one was truly bound by their circumstances, that change was always possible. "We are not prisoners of our past," the philosopher said. "We are not slaves to our nature. Every day, we wake up and decide who we want to be. That is the greatest gift and the greatest responsibility of conscious beings." After the lecture, Kethvon approached the philosopher with questions. "In my society, our roles are decided at birth. Warriors are hatched as warriors. Workers are hatched as workers. Rulers are hatched as rulers. Are you saying this is wrong?" The philosopher considered carefully. "I am saying it is a choice. Your society chose to organize itself that way. But choices can be changed. Nothing is permanent except the laws of physics, and even those are negotiable, according to some of my colleagues." He smiled at his own joke. Kethvon did not understand the joke, but he understood the meaning beneath it. Everything he had believed about the universe was a choice. Someone had chosen it. Someone could choose differently. That night, Kethvon received an urgent message from the hegemony. Supreme Arbiter Vesel herself had sent orders. The delegation was to return immediately. No more delays. No more excuses. Kethvan gathered his people in a large hall at the hotel. He looked at them and saw how much they had changed. The warriors stood differently now, less rigid, less ready for violence. The officials asked questions before giving orders. The nobles looked at each other with something approaching friendship. "We have been ordered to return," he said. No one moved. No one spoke. "The Supreme Arbiter demands our presence. Failure to comply will be considered treason." Still nothing. Finally, Admiral Cirith spoke. "What happens if we do not return? The fleet will come for us. They will destroy Earth and everyone on it. Then, we must return," Cirith said. "We cannot let them hurt these people." She looked around at the others. They all nodded. They all agreed. Kethvan felt something warm spread through his chest. His people were willing to give up their new lives to protect humans. Creatures they should have conquered. Enemies they should have despised. They had become something new. Something the hegemony had never seen. They had become protectors. "We will return," Kethvan said. "But we will not return empty-handed." He walked to the window and looked up at the stars where the Valori fleet waited. "We are going to bring something back with us. Something far more dangerous than any weapon. Something the hegemony has no defense against." "What?" asked the young noble. Kethvan smiled. It was the first time any of them had seen him smile. Everything. The music. The stories. The ideas. The dreams. "We are going to infect the entire hegemony with the one thing that can destroy it." He turned back to face his people. "We are going to show them what it means to be free." The delegation began to pack. They gathered books and recordings and files. They collected everything they had learned, everything they had experienced, everything they had become. Ambassador Elena Vasquez came to say goodbye. She stood before Kethvan with that same calm smile she had worn since the beginning. "You know what you are doing?" she asked. "No," Kethvan admitted. "But I know it is right." Elena nodded. "That is usually how it works. The right thing is rarely the easy thing. Did you plan this?" Kethvan asked. "Did you know what would happen when you invited us here?" Elena thought for a moment. "I hoped," she said. "I believed that if you saw who we really are, you would not be able to unsee it. I believe that knowledge is like a door. Once it opens, it can never fully close again. You were right. I usually aim." She extended her hand. "Good luck, Kethvan. Whatever happens next, know that you will always be welcome here." Kethvan took her hand carefully, afraid of crushing her fragile human bones. He understood now why humans did this. It was a connection, a promise, a moment of trust between two beings who were not so different after all. The shuttles lifted off the next morning. 300 Dalori returned to the fleet, carrying within them the seeds of revolution. And far below, humanity watched them go and waited to see what would grow. The flagship of the Valori fleet was named Eternal Dominion. It was the largest warship ever built, capable of destroying entire planets with a single blast. Its corridors were decorated with trophies from 1,000 conquests. Its walls were aligned with the weapons of defeated enemies. High Arbiter Kethvan walked those corridors now, flanked by guards who looked at him with suspicion. Word had spread through the fleet. The delegation had been corrupted. The humans had done something to them. Nobody knew exactly what. That was the most frightening part. Kethvan was brought before Supreme Arbiter Viso in the Grand Council chamber. She sat on a throne carved from the shell of a conquered species, her ancient body wrapped in ceremonial armor. She had ruled the hegemony for 300 years. She had personally ordered the destruction of 200 worlds. She was the most powerful being in known space, and she was very, very angry. "Explain yourself," she said. Her voice was like grinding stone. Kethvan stood straight. He did not bow. He did not lower his eyes. These were small rebellions, but Vexal noticed them immediately. I did as you ordered, Kethvan said. I studied the humans. I learned their weaknesses and their strengths. You were supposed to prepare them for conquest. Instead, you spent 6 months playing games with them. I was learning. Learning what? Vexal leaned forward on her throne. What could those primitive creatures possibly teach you? Kethvan thought carefully about his answer. He knew that everything depended on the next few moments. They taught me questions, he said. Questions? Questions we have never asked ourselves. Why do we conquer? What do we gain? What do we lose? Is there another way to live? Vexal made a sound of disgust. These are the words of weakness. The words of prey. We are Valori. We do not question. We dominate. For 10,000 years, we have dominated, Kethvan agreed. And what do we have? Ships and weapons and empty worlds. We have conquered everything except our own emptiness. The council chamber went silent. No one had ever spoken this way to a supreme arbiter. No one had ever survived long enough to try. Vexal rose from her throne. She was old, but she was still strong. She walked toward Kethvan until they stood face to face. The humans have infected you, she said. They have put poison in your mind. They have given me sight, Kethvan replied. For the first time in my life, I can see clearly. Vexal struck him across the face with her armored fist. The blow sent him staggering backward. You are relieved of your command, she said. You and your entire delegation will be executed for treason. The human world will be destroyed as an example to all who would resist us. She turned to her guards. Take him to the cells. Prepare the fleet for assault. I want Earth burning within the hour. The guards stepped forward to seize Kethvan, and then something happened that had never happened before in Valori history. Admiral Cirith stepped between the guards and Kethvan. No, she said. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. No Valori had ever refused a direct order from a supreme arbiter. The concept did not exist. It was not possible, but there it was. A single word. A small rebellion. The guards stopped, confused. They looked at Vexal for guidance. Vexal stared at Cirith with naked shock. What did you say? I said no. Cirith's voice was steady. I will not let you kill him. I will not let you destroy Earth. You forget your place, Admiral. I am remembering it. Cirith stood taller. I am a protector. That is what warriors are supposed to be. Not destroyers, not murderers, protectors. Vexal laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. This is what the humans have done to you? They have turned warriors into philosophers? They have turned monsters into people, Cirith said. Throughout the council chamber, members of the delegation were stepping forward. The scientist, the young noble, the weapons master who had learned to cook, the strategic planner who had watched children play. One by one, they joined Cirith. One by one, they said no. Vexal watched with growing fury. Kill them, she ordered. Kill them all. The guards raised their weapons, but they did not fire. One of them, a young soldier barely out of training, loaded his weapon instead. Why? He asked. Everyone turned to look at him. Why do we kill them? The soldier continued. What have they done except ask questions? Is asking questions truly a crime worthy of death? They have committed treason, Vexal said. By thinking? The soldier shook his head. I have spent my whole life following orders without questioning them. I never asked why we conquer. I never asked what we fight for. Maybe it is time to start asking. Another guard lowered his weapon, then another, then another. Vexal screamed with rage. She drew her own weapon and pointed it at the delegation. If you will not execute them, I will do it myself. Then you will have to kill me too. The voice came from the doorway. A senior captain entered the chamber, followed by dozens of officers and soldiers. Word had spread through the ship. Word was spreading through the fleet. "The delegation sent us files," the captain said. "Music and stories and ideas. We have been listening. We have been reading. We have been thinking." He walked toward Vessel, showing no fear. "You have ruled us for 300 years. You have told us what to believe and what to want and who to be. You have told us that conquest is our purpose and domination is our nature." He stopped in front of her. "What if you were wrong?" The fleet began to fracture, not into war, but into debate. Ships that had sailed together for centuries suddenly found themselves on opposite sides. Crews argued with their captains. Soldiers questioned their commanders. The questions spread like fire. Why do we conquer? What is the purpose of our empire? Is there more to existence than power? Vexel tried to restore order. She executed rebels and made examples of dissenters. But for everyone she killed, 10 more rose to take their place, because that was the thing about questions. Once asked, they could not be unasked. Once doubt entered a mind, it could never be fully removed. Kethvalm watched from his cell as the hegemony began to tear itself apart. Guards argued outside his door. Officers fought in the corridors. The sound of conflict echoed through the ship. Admiral Cirith came to release him on the 3rd day. "Vexel is dead," she said. Her own guards turned on her when she ordered them to destroy a ship full of questioners. "What happens now?" Cirith shook her head. "I do not know. The fleet is divided. Some want to continue the old ways. Some want to try something new. Everyone is confused and afraid." Kethvan stepped out of his cell and looked around at the chaos surrounding them. "Good," he said. "Good. We are falling apart. We are being reborn." He put his hand on her shoulder. "The old hegemony is dying. Something new is being born. It will be painful and difficult and frightening, but it is also necessary." He began walking toward the command center. "Where are you going?" "To talk to the fleet. To share what we learned on Earth. To help them understand that there is another way to live." Cirith followed him. So did others. More joined them as they walked. By the time they reached the command center, a crowd had gathered. Kethvan stood before the communication controls and opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. His face appeared on screens throughout the Armada. "My name is Kethvan," he said. "I was sent to Earth to prepare for its conquest. Instead, I learned something that changed everything I believed." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I learned that we have a choice. We can continue to be what we have always been, or we can become something new, something better." He looked directly into the camera. "I cannot tell you what to choose. That is the point. For the first time in our history, each of us must decide for ourselves. That is terrifying. But it is also the most important thing we will ever do." He took a deep breath. "I choose to change. I choose hope over fear. I choose connection over conquest. I choose to believe that we can be more than what we were made to be." He ended the transmission. The fleet was silent. Then, one by one, responses began coming in. Ships declaring their support. Soldiers pledging to try a different way. Commanders asking what they should do next. The revolution had begun. The war lasted 11 years. Thought it was not a war like the Valori had ever fought before. There were battles, yes. Ships clashed in the darkness between stars. Soldiers fought on the surfaces of 100 worlds. Many died, but the real conflict was not fought with weapons. It was fought with words. Every day, new ideas spread through Valori space. Music from Earth played on military frequencies. Human books were translated into the Valori language and shared from ship to ship. Philosophy lectures were broadcast across entire star systems. The hegemony loyalists tried to stop the flow of information. They burned books and jammed broadcasts and executed anyone caught sharing human ideas. But information was like water. It found every crack, every gap, every opening dot, and slowly, steadily, the balance shifted. Worlds that had supported the hegemony began asking questions. Soldiers who had fought their entire lives began wondering what they were fighting for. Commanders who had never known anything but obedience began to imagine different possibilities. Earth stayed officially neutral throughout the conflict. The human government declared that this was a Valori matter, to be decided by Valori themselves. But unofficially, humanity did everything it could to help. Teachers volunteered to travel to Valori space. They established schools on rebel worlds, teaching reading and writing and critical thinking. They taught children that asking questions was not weakness, but strength. Artists sent their work across the stars. Paintings and sculptures and music flowed into Valori culture, opening minds that had been closed for 10,000 years. Philosophers engaged in debates with Valori thinkers, exploring questions that had never been asked. What is the purpose of a life? What makes a society just? What do we owe each other? And refugees came to Earth. Thousands of Valori who could not fight but did not want to live under the old ways. Humans welcomed them. They gave them homes and jobs and communities. They showed them that different species could live together in peace. Admiral Sirith led the rebel military forces. She had never wanted to be a general. She had never wanted to fight her own people. But someone had to do it, and she was the best qualified. She fought with new rules. No destroying civilian targets. No killing surrendered enemies. No conquest of worlds that did not want to join. Her soldiers called it soft. Her enemies called it weakness. But slowly, it became clear that her way worked better. Planets surrendered to her forces, not out of fear, but out of hope. Soldiers defected not because they were cowards, but because they wanted to be part of something better. Her army grew not through conquest, but through conversion. In the 8th year of the war, the hegemony loyalists attempted a final desperate gamble. They gathered their remaining fleet and launched an attack on Earth itself. If they could destroy the source of the infection, perhaps they could save what remained of the old ways. The rebel fleet moved to intercept. The battle that followed was the largest in Valori history. Thousands of ships clashed in the space around. Sol System. And humanity finally joined the fight. Human warships emerged from hidden positions throughout the system. They were smaller than Valori vessels, less powerful, less sophisticated. But there were many of them, and they fought with a fury that surprised even the rebels. "You are not alone," Admiral Marcus Webb transmitted to the rebel fleet. "You never were." The combined forces crushed the hegemony loyalists. The last supreme arbiter died when his flagship was destroyed. The old order ended not with a whimper, but with a final, defiant explosion. 3 years later, the war officially ended. The Valori hegemony was gone. In its place rose the Valori Confederation, a voluntary alliance of self-governing worlds. Each planet chose its own leaders and made its own laws. They worked together not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. Kethvan was elected to serve as the Confederation's first representative to the new Interstellar Council. He had not wanted the position. He had spent the war years traveling from world to world, talking to people, sharing ideas, trying to help build something new. But the people chose him. They trusted him. They believed he could speak for them. The inaugural session of the Interstellar Council was held on a space station orbiting a neutral star. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness the birth of something unprecedented. A galactic community based on cooperation. Instead of conquest, Kethvan sat in the Valori section and looked around at the gathered delegates. There were species he had once conquered. There were species he had never met. All of them were watching him, waiting to see what the new Valori would say. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat nearby. She was old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with decades of work. But her eyes still sparkled with the same sharp intelligence. Kethvon remembered from their first meeting. A delegate from a recently contacted species rose to speak. They were small creatures, covered in soft fur, with wide eyes that expressed constant surprise. "We have heard much about the transformation of the Valori," the delegate said. "We have heard stories that seem impossible. The greatest military power in the galaxy, defeated not by weapons, but by ideas." The delegate looked at Kethvon, then at Elena. "We must know. How did humanity defeat the Valori? What weapon did you use?" Elena Vasquez smiled. It was the same smile she had worn 30 years ago when she first stepped onto the Hegemony flagship. The smile of someone who knew something others did not. She stood slowly, leaning on a cane for support. "The Valori came to us with an offer of peace," she said. "Peace through submission. Peace through surrender. The peace of slaves who are allowed to live at their master's pleasure." She looked at Kethvon. He nodded for her to continue. "We could not defeat them in battle. Their fleet was too strong. Their technology was too advanced. If we had fought, we would have lost. Our world would have burned. Our species would have been enslaved or destroyed." She paused. "So we did something else. We invited them home for dinner." A murmur ran through the council chamber. Several delegates exchanged confused looks. "We showed them our world, our lives, our culture. We let them see who we really are. Not as enemies, not as conquerors, just as people." She turned to face the entire council. The Valari had defenses against weapons. They had shields and armor and warships beyond counting. But they had no defense against an invitation, no protection against kindness, no shield against the simple question, "Why?" She pointed at Kethvon. "We did not conquer them. We did not defeat them. We simply showed them a door they had never noticed before, a door to a different way of living. They chose to walk through it themselves." The furry delegate spoke again. "But the war, the suffering, was it worth it?" Kethvon stood to answer this question. "Many died," he said. "My people killed each other for 11 years over questions they should have been asking for 10,000. That blood is on our hands. On my hands." He looked around the chamber. "But look at what we have built. Worlds that chose their own destiny. People who ask questions and seek answers. Children who dream of possibilities instead of conquests." He turned to Elena. "Was it worth it? I cannot answer for the dead. I can only speak for the living. And I say yes. 1,000 times yes." The old hegemony was a prison for body and mind alike. We did not know we were prisoners because we had never seen the sky. He sat back down. Elena remained standing. "The Valori asked me, years ago, if I planned what happened. If I knew how this would end. The truth is, I did not know. I only hoped." She smiled at the memory. "Humans have a long history of causing harm. We have done terrible things to each other. We have been monsters. But we have also been something else. We have been dreamers. We have looked at impossible situations and imagined better outcomes. We have reached out to enemies and offered them friendship." She straightened despite her old bones. "That is the weapon we used against the Valori. Not technology, not military force. Hope, the belief that people can change. That enemies can become friends. That the universe can be better than it is." She looked at the gathered delegates. "Some of you fear humanity. You hear stories of our violence and wonder if we might turn that violence against you someday. I understand that fear. It is reasonable." She shook her head slowly. "But I ask you to consider another possibility. What if our greatest weapon is not our capacity for war, but our capacity for connection? What if the most dangerous thing about humans is not our anger, but our love?" She sat down heavily. The council chamber was silent. Finally, Kethvon spoke again. 30 years ago, Ambassador Vasquez told me that knowledge is like a door. Once it opens, it can never fully close again. I did not understand her then. I do now. He stood one more time. The door is open. For all of us. The question now is simple. What will we do with what we have learned? Will we walk through to something new? Or will we stay in our comfortable prisons? He looked at Elena. She looked at him. I know my answer. I choose the door. I choose hope. I choose tomorrow. He extended his hand to her. She took it. Together, she said. Together, he agreed. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds. Beings who had known only fear began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, there was another way to live. The door was open. All they had to do was walk through.